Hello and welcome to the flipped recording on Unit 3, Lesson 2, Finding Sumar in your World History 1 course. Here's a quick overview of the lesson. We have our lesson introduction, Finding Sumar. We are going to explore Sumar found, and then you have a lesson assessment as well for this lesson. And today's objective, you want to be able to name at least 3 clues that helped archaeologists and historians document the existence of Sumar. Now let's jump right into our lesson introduction. Just when the archaeologists and historians studying the ancient civilizations in Mesopotamia thought they had the answer, another clue would pop up. You've already read about 4 clues that led to the discovery of Sumar, but there are more. We're going to take a look at those. And as always, don't forget to click on that lesson resources button on the first slide of your lesson to open up the student guide and other resources that you need to complete this lesson. And as you take a look at your student guide, the very first activity that it asks us to take a look at is to check your reading from your previous lesson. So in lesson 1, you were reading in chapter 2 on pages 37 through 42. And you were asked to list at least 3 things that helped archaeologists and historians document the existence of Sumar. So check your history journal, make sure that you listed 3 of those. If not, go back and look at those pages now, 37 through 42, and see if you can jot a few things down. Here are some of the things that you should have seen that helped archaeologists and historians document the existence of Sumar. Those were stories that had been passed down, clay tablets, various artifacts, writing, cities built upon cities, and the mounds containing the remains of cities. If you are missing any of those in your notes, go ahead and put those in your notes now. The next activity, it asks for us to read. Complete part 1 of the who, what, where sheet as you read chapter 2 from the 4th clue, A Key to Strange Writing, to the end. So you're going to be reading pages 42 through 45 in your textbook. So go ahead and grab that and read that. We're going to kind of look through some of that now. We're not going to read it word for word, but you should read this selection in your text in its entirety. So pages 42 to 45 is what you're going to be reading for this lesson today. So as you begin your reading on page 42, starting with the 4th clue, it starts talking about the cuneiform writing. And in our previous reading, we had learned about the clay tablets that have been described with this writing that they could not even begin to read, and they would need another clue to be able to decipher all of these strange symbols that they had found on these tablets. This was going to actually, the key to cuneiform writing was going to turn up in another part of the Middle East. It was going to turn up in Persia. And so we're going to look on the next slide at a map to locate Persia. The book tells us to find Persia on the map on pages 38 and 39, and so you can see in the upper right hand corner, this is the map on pages 38 to 39 in our textbook. And then what was once Persia is now the country called Iran. So locate Iran on an up-to-date map. So on the left-hand side, I've put that up-to-date map. And so you can see Persia here on the map in our textbook, and you can kind of get some points of reference. If you locate the Caspian Sea here and then locate it on our modern day map, you can see that underneath this area is Mesopotamia. And so this would have been the area known as Mesopotamia on our modern day map. And then Persia was kind of to the southeast of the Caspian Sea. So if we kind of go there, Persia is in modern day Iran. And here at the foot of the Zagros Mountains is where we're going to be finding the evidence to help us to solve the clue of cuneiform. And so we're going to continue reading about that. But I just wanted to be able to compare this map with our modern day map to kind of get an idea of the area that we're talking about. So, at the foot of the Zagros Mountains in Persia, there was a king, Darius the Great. He was the Persian king, and he carved a message on a rock face. And he wanted to make sure that everyone knew that he was a great king. And so he had this message carved in 3 languages. All 3 languages were written in cuneiform. So, archaeologists now have to figure out how to study this writing, and that was the first challenge because the carving was 300 feet above ground. So they had to come up with a little ingenuity, and they had a system using long ladders, cables, and hooks, and then dangling from the end of a rope Rawlinson, an Englishman, copied the writing. Once the writing was copied, still the toughest work lay ahead. They now had to translate this. So Rawlinson had a great idea. He knew that many writings from Persian kings began by saying, so and so, the great king, the king of kings, the son of so and so. And so maybe the cuneiform began with these words. So he suggested that, and they went to work studying the cuneiform to test his idea. The order of the marks told them that he was right, and so now they had a key that other scholars could figure out one of the messages, and it described the king's victories in battle and how he had gained the throne. And so now maybe they could use this to translate the other two messages. One of the two messages was written in the language of ancient Babylon, and scholars compared that with the Babylonian message from the writing on the tablets from southern Mesopotamia, and they matched. Scholars were able to use proper nouns and their knowledge of the first inscription to help them decipher what the second Babylonian cuneiform text said. They suspected, though, that the cuneiform was not designed for writing in Babylon because it had some awkward fittings and pronunciations, and so it made them wonder if the Babylonians had perhaps borrowed their writings from an earlier and separate people. Maybe you can guess who they were borrowing these from. So, step by step, the scholars had managed to find the earliest writings of all, and years later, they would decipher these writings. So, once they learned how to read them, a whole new world opened up for them, and the clay tablets gave up their secrets, leading the archaeologists back past the Babylonians to the people who invented cuneiform writing, the Sumerians. And so they're going to continue to dig deeper and deeper and putting together the last pieces of the puzzles. They're now unearthing the ancient cities of Babylon and then older and older artifacts, and at last they came to the cities of Sumer. So the archaeologists went to work studying the Sumerian artifacts and were astounded to find that many were made before 3000 BC. And the archaeologists had discovered remains from the earliest known civilization on Earth. Some of these things that they were finding had been buried for thousands of years, and many had been crushed by the weight of the soil on top of them. So the pieces were mixed with dirt and clay, and so archaeologists would have to remove the discoveries, trying not to break them into even smaller pieces. Sometimes it would take hours to remove just a tiny piece of a single object. The teams of archaeologists worked in southern Mesopotamia, and they found all sorts of Sumerian treasures: helmets, gold crowns, gold drinking cups, daggers, harps, silver jewelry. And all of these artifacts had stories to tell and told about the Sumerian people, yet that evidence lay hidden for thousands of years. Sir Leonard Woolley, a British archaeologist, spent 12 years from 1922 to 1934 excavating the Sumerian city of Ur, and you can locate that here on the map. In that time, he made a discovery that excited the whole world. Deep in the ruins of Ur, he found 16 pits, which he called the royal tombs. And at the bottom of each lay the skeletons of many men and women. The pits were grave pits. And so Woolley came upon surprise after surprise in these pits. He found the remains of soldiers with copper helmets on their heads and spears at their sides. He found all kinds of musical instruments, and wagons and bones. And in one tomb, he found the body of a woman set apart from the others. She wore a fantastic headdress of gold and large crescent gold earrings. Her body was covered with beads of gold and silver and lapis lazuli. And Woolley had discovered the remains of famous queen known as Queen Puabi. And the bodies of 5 men with copper daggers guarded the entrance to her grave. And her ladies in waiting slept near her in neat, orderly rows. So he found no signs of struggle or violence, and so all the men and women in the grave must have died peacefully. And so what did that mean? And so he began to study the clues to find out what had happened here. One clue seemed especially important. Next to each body was a little cup. After studying all the clues, Willie concluded that first, a large deep hole was dug in the ground with a dirt ramp leading down into it. Queen Puabi's body was placed in a stone tomb in the grave pit, and then all the queen's servants went down the rep, knowing that they were descending, as they were descending, what that they were going to die. You can see some images here, but the cup that they each drank from probably would have held some kind of poison or drug to put them asleep. And so this was like their funeral. We may never know for sure if Woolley's explanation was right, but we do know that the grave pits were dug about 4,500 years ago and that their treasures can still be seen today. So one mystery was solved, but archaeologists and historians want to know much more about the life of ancient Sumerians. Perhaps in time they will discover a civilization that developed even earlier than Sumer, but at least one great mystery has been solved. Sumerian civilization, which had been forgotten for centuries, has now been unearthed. Ancient Sumer lies in the modern-day nation of Iraq, and in the late 20th and early 21st century, Iraq was ravaged by tyranny and war, and excavations of Sumer stopped in 1991 after the Persian Gulf War. Archaeologists hope to go back to Iraq and resume their work as soon as they can. So, as we wrap up this lesson, check your reading from lesson 1, read pages 42 through 45, complete part 1 and part 2 of the who, what, where sheet, bring that sheet to class, and we will review that together. I will see you on the flip side, so make sure you look for the flip follow-up session in your Class Connect set schedule. Attend that live session, and we will carry this topic into further practice. You can also attend the Help Lab afterwards for extra support. Have fun, and see you soon.